Okay, now looking at developing interpretations. So first, let's have a look at the study design, what it wants you to do. In this area of study, you try to understand the different ways that you can read and comprehend a text by developing your own and considering and comparing different interpretations of a set text that's been allocated to you. You will first develop your own interpretation of a set text, your typical close reading and write an essay on something, analyzing how ideas, views, and values are presented in text, the ways that they are endorsed, challenged, and even marginalized through literary forms, features, and language. So you need to be analyzing just as many things as adaptations and interpretations, have an understanding of everything with a strong focus on ideas, views, and values and opinions, your own interpretation. Basically, your challenge is to create a super strong interpretation in light of historical, social, and cultural context and your own views and values as readers. So you actually get to explore your own interpretation and why you think that. But after this is a two-part task, so your typical essay, your own interpretation, and then the second half of the task is where you explore a supplementary reading. Might be the opinion of a critic, an analysis from a critic. And it could be anything really. We'll look at some examples, but you read a supplementary reading, you analyze that as well, and you're either going to lean towards more you agree with it or you disagree with it. So it either enriches, challenges, or contests the ideas and the views, values, and assumptions of the set text to further enhance your understanding as a student. Examples of a supplementary reading can include things like writing by your own teacher. Maybe they write their own interpretative essay like you did, a scholarly article, that analysis from a critic, or an explication of a literary theory. So though that these have been formally omitted from the study design, as of, since the study design changes, you may still use them. So you might be reading about feminism, Marxism, Freudian ideas, and looking at a text through a certain lens. A supplementary reading that provides only opinion or evaluation of the relative merits of the text is not considered appropriate. So your supplementary reading is analytical of your set text. It's not discussing how good it is. Then after you've been informed by the supplementary reading, you have to decide which ideas from it you want to take and agree with to enhance your own interpretation and make it even better, which ones you completely disagree with, and you will be discussing as the differences from your interpretation and that interpretation's ideas that you disagree with, and you will be challenging those as well, aiming to have some of both. And then you apply this understanding to key moments from the text, supporting your work with considered textual evidence. So you will even be expected to, quote from whatever this supplementary reading is to substantiate your essay. And you're writing in response to key moments from the text. So if you've already seen the examiner's report, you're basically given a passage from the text, and you're writing in response to that passage. Key knowledge that is assessed, context, the ideas of the text and how they're presented, views, values, and assumptions, yours and the supplementary readings, how they're endorsed, challenged, and or marginalized, interpretation of a set text through close reading and exploration and consideration of the text context. Second interpretation through the supplementary reading, so two-part SAC here, writing analytical responses, and being able to make the link between language, form, features in language, and meaning. So still need to explain that link. So it's a relatively new task. This is going to be your Unit 3 area of study 2. Thankfully, there is, heaps of examples available for you now, and you know what the exam is going to look like. You don't have to wait for a sample exam to appear. It is still grounded in the literary perspectives task. What used to be on the older study design was you used to get a prompt and you need to just write an essay through a certain lens, such as I did an interpretation for a feminist lens. So everything was based around all the evidence, all the discussion was based around that feminist perspective. Okay. And you needed to remember quotes and bring them into the exam. What the assessors were thinking with this task to help you out was they made it a task that gives you a key moment from the text. So it's a passage, right? So you don't have to memorize quotes. And using a literary theory, I highly recommend if you want to be a 40 plus achiever for this subject with developing interpretations. I still recommend it, but it's become optional now. Okay. So they've tried to make the task easier for you, but it is very, very similar in that it aims to achieve and enhance interpretation. Kind of the same thing. It's all about the quality of the interpretation. So the two-step process is constructing your own interpretation of a text based on reading, discussion, passage analyses, writing an essay on that, and then reading a supplementary reading, such as a literary analysis, with your own analysis in order to develop an enhanced interpretation. Basically, sift through your ideas, decide what you agree with. Are you steadfast in your own opinion? What are the things you did like from the supplementary reading? And changing, evolving, making your interpretation evolve. But you will need to closely analyze, study, learn quotes from your supplementary reading as well for this SAC. Must quote from both your set text with the key moment, the passage that you're going to be given, as well as the critics, in order to provide evidence for your interpretation. So the requirement of this task is that you examine how others and yourself respond to text and how textual evidence has caused these views to emerge. You need to remember the idea of your text acting as a construction the whole way. To explain this, the author's views, values, and messages are, of course, embedded within the text, okay? The author did aim to construct the text to position the reader to respond in a particular way. Maybe not on a million things, but on some things at least, okay? And it's often aiming to get us to agree with views and values that they hold. But everyone, including your supplementary reading, will likely still respond to the text in different ways. The more interesting essays you can write, I think, is when your ideas and the supplementary readings ideas, the more they differ, the more likely your essay will be more interesting. That's what I personally think, because you will have more ways that you want to challenge it, but you'll also find ideas that you never thought of that are different from your other ideas that you're going to embed. So makes it more interesting. The whole idea for the exam is, you don't have to do what your school did. You can go out of your way, find your own supplementary reading that you like. You can find a critic's analysis of your text through a certain lens that you really enjoy yourself and use that for your exam essay instead. So just keep that in mind. It's never punishable if you incorporate quotes from critics in lit, as long as you don't do it all the time without writing anything yourself. But you can analyze people's opinions, and that used to be very commonly done in this literary perspectives task, and it's still encouraged in this task as well. So go out there, find supplementary readings. This is an example of one of those critics articles that I'm talking about. It looks at it through, it looks at Candid, really good book, through a feminist lens in this example. So this might be something like what you were working with, or this is something you can go out of your way to look for to substantiate your own interpretation. Consider implicature, the strength or effectiveness of certain readings or interpretations. We can have strong and weak implicature. Strong implicature is no good. This refers to if you make interpretations that are really obvious, evident, and overt. They will be super easy to justify, but they'll also be very heavily implied, and everyone will have had the same idea. What you really want to be looking for is weak implicature, whatever's less obvious in the text. Consider how easily or confidently you can infer your own ideas and views and values from a character's actions. Practice this skill and do work with resources and supplementary readings of your own to make yourself do better in this SAC, to practice that weak implicature skill, or to literally take ideas if you have to, if you're really struggling. And we've got an example of strong and weak implicature there. Character spends lots of hours volunteering with dogs, so of course they like dogs. That's strong implicature. But if it's weak implicature, if a character will only do so if they're paid for their time, we could infer that maybe they do like dogs, but we could also argue that they're there for other reasons. That's weaker implicature. Really basic examples, but I just want to make sure everyone gets it. We need to consider implicature because it highlights that there isn't just one definitive reading of a text, but it also shows that there aren't infinite equally justifiable readings, because the strong implicature readings are basic, they're boring. So you can instead view literary criticisms as having strong or weak implicatures, and then use that to appraise or evaluate how valuable to you that particular theory is. Okay. Divide different implicatures in a text. If you are working with your supplementary reading, look for the ones that the critic states that are inevitably obvious. Maybe you still need one or two of those, or you can completely brush them off and look for the ones with weak implicature that are really implicit. Choose the ones that you like and think about whether the author of that supplementary reading did a good job at justifying that. If they didn't do a good job at justifying the implicit ones, can you fix that, or is it just not great? Okay. Flesh out the elements of weak implicatures in your work. These are the ones you need to justify in more detail, analyze in more detail, and then it will become invaluable to your essay. Texts that you study could also have views and values that are problematic or unclear. That might be to us as a modern audience, or the audience of the author's time. If you see that, they're probably going to be linked to the context of the text, okay? So if it appears really unclear to you, or the views and values don't make sense, or it's just difficult to pick them up, go and research the context. You should research the context anyway. And you have the ability to endorse or critique the views and values too, because this is such an opinionated task. So you can think about whether you find the views and values acceptable, whether you think they're progressive, or whether the author is failing to challenge something unjust. It's a bit of an Englishy structure for this task, like VCE Englishy, considering that I did the subject, but I recommend having an intro, 3 to 4 body paragraphs, and a conclusion. If you come back for when we look at close analysis for the literature lecture in like July, you'll see how much freedom you have with the structures that I will propose, like 5 or 6 of them that are completely different, but a bit of a more standard structure, unfortunately, for developing interpretations. Now, every school is going to do this differently. I've given you a very detailed potential idea for structure that I'll quickly just brush past, because I don't know if you want to take it or not, but I would hate to push a structure upon students. It's all optional. It gives you your own idea of what you want to work with. So an intro could look like in introducing the set text any relevant background info that you just usually quickly then mention, like the genre and text type. You may mention the context as well. And you could go for the mention of the zeitgeist or the general mood of society at the time. Then you may link to the prompt and or the passages. On the exam, it is passages, so hopefully your SAC should be as well. Link to the passage and the key ideas that you will be addressing in your essay. Basically, what is key in that passage is whatever your interpretation has to be based around, right? And introduce the critical pieces / supplementary reading that you will be using, including minimal author and publication details, what their context is and how it might actually affect their interpretation or influence it. What's their contention and key ideas with regards to the material you're working with, based on what you know about them. If they use the literary perspective, like the feminism I was talking about, but there's heaps more, and comparison between the critics' approaches. You can compare your approach with their approach. I do. You can always just end with your overall interpretation of the authorial intent with relevance to your interpretation that you stated in the intro. Or you could link that around here where you link to prompt passages and or key ideas. So it's optional. All right. So that's an overly detailed intro, but these are kinds of things that you could include, and it is in an order that you could do it in, but it is long. Okay. So it's just optional. For body paragraphs, this is a bit more specific, but obviously you now have to balance your discussion of the text and analyzing the text and the passage with your discussion and analysis of both your interpretations and the interpretation of the supplementary readings offered. So you can aim for a 50-50 split between analyzing the text and the critical interpretations, yours and the supplementary readings. And that should be a relatively foolproof structure. Essentially, what you cannot do is split these things into separate paragraphs, because then there's no flow. So both interpretations should be discussed in each paragraph alongside the evidence that you're analyzing to show that you understand the interpretations and how they relate to the key moment of the text that's been given in the passage to you. A potential structure, very optional. You do kind of need topic sentences, okay? Because this is all about developing interpretation. So do have some kind of focus for the paragraph that you outline. I know this is VCE English, but you should have that. And then you could potentially follow a structure like this, or you could have analysis after your focus has been outlined of that key moment, and every once in a while you link into your first reading and your second reading, basically your interpretation, your enhanced interpretation compared to the critics. I would probably go for more of a conceptual focus, analyze, and intermittently link to the critical interpretations, mine and the supplementary readings, and then summarizing with what my overall enhanced interpretation is after all of it. Okay, but this is all very, very flexible. If you do have a conclusion, which would be good when there are two different interpretations you're writing about, I do recommend having one here. You should summarize the overall viewpoints of both interpretations, yours as well as the supplementary readings. You could outline the main similarities and differences, or the key ones, the ones that are the most interesting and you discuss the most. And you can resolve any discrepancies optionally. But basically, the problems that may arise is if you don't have a clear personal interpretation, you need to really decide on this and plan for different themes and ideas from a certain lens what is my view. You need to be really decided, especially after analyzing and working with your supplementary reading. Have distinct opinions, okay? The problem would be not engaging with the prompt if you're given one, but you're really probably going to get that key moment slash passage. You need to engage with the key moment. That's why we're saying 50-50 split between analysis and the two interpretations, okay? Because the expectation is you need to be actually analyzing that key moment within the passage, or you will face a penalty. And if you do have a prompt, do what the prompt says. Stick to the prompt. Don't extrapolate. Example of the task. Um, this is from the sample exam for Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. This is the passage. Discuss the ways in which the concept of fear is endorsed, challenged, and or marginalized by the text. They make it so easy for you because they don't give you a specific statement to answer. They're just saying, write about fear. Okay? Is it endorsed, challenged, or marginalized by the text? What's your opinion on fear? And what's the supplementary reading that you did? What's the opinion on fear there? And it just wants you to do that while analyzing the key moment for about 50% of the times as a good basis. Okay, so hopefully that reassures everyone. I don't know how schools